Start.
You are good to
Hello,
start.
everyone.
Hey, everybody,
Hello.
come on in, grab a cup of coffee.
Hello.
Let's have a good session. Some of you may have remembered me from yesterday.
Definitely.
If you don't remember me, I'm Dr. Anastasia, and I'm one of the old timers around here. Dr. Villarreal and I are both old timers around here.
All
Were
right,
you
Dr. V.
were
Yeah,
you in
and
jail with her?
I'm sorry.
Were you in jail with her?
Well, no,
You would have had to
That's
been there,
not
Dr.
funny.
Anastasia, to get that. But yeah, she was my cellie. She was my cellmate.
That's funny.
well, never have I started this session off with that question. That is hilarious. All right. So, all silliness aside, well, no, we're not quite done with silliness. I'm Dr. Anastasia. I have been teaching here at CTU for 20 years. I am a research supervisor. So, usually you run into me when you are starting to write your dissertation. So, let's start off with 2 lies and 2 truths. I think yesterday it was 3 lies, 1 truth. I'd never remember what I do. I'm a master gardener. I publish children's books, a series called Benny the Cockatoo. I speak fluent Mandarin. I rescue abandoned and neglected birds. Just jump into the chat pod and tell me which ones you think are true. Well, I think so many of you were there yesterday.
Yes.
So yes, I do rescue exotic and
Mhm.
neglected birds. And my one bird, Benny, who is on my granddaughter's shoulder here, he has his own little book series called Benny the Cockatoo. And
Yep.
I love my birds. All right, so this is a
Mhm.
very laid back session, and I do have Joelle from the library, and she is going to help me as well by answering questions. If you have questions, just you can raise your hand and ask them out loud. You can put them in the text box. The bottom line is, I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable asking questions. That's what this is all about. And I don't like the formal, the formal feel of a presentation. So, just speak out if I say something that you need more clarity on. And so if you saw my presentation yesterday, I talked about the body of knowledge. And then I talked about how, you're putting one little drop and yada, yada, yada into that body of knowledge. Well, if there's one thing that is super duper duper important that you need to remember as you move forward, is that no matter what you do with your research, dissertation, proposal, prospectus, all roads lead back to the literature review. If there is one constant in your dissertation, it is the literature review. So I can't tell you how super important this is. It is so important because it is that literature review that makes you a subject matter expert on what you're researching. This is where you get your expertise because you are going in there and you are learning about what research has been done on a topic, what type of people have been involved, what type of industries, organizations, and the list goes on and on and on. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the literature review. And in the literature review, we're basically answering the who, what, when, where, how, why. And by doing that, we are building a story of what is happening in a specific area. Sky's the limit. Computer sciences, executive leadership, human resources. It does, insert word here. And what you're doing is you're building this story on your topic that is going to take the reader on a journey. And by the end of that journey, in chapter 2, which is your literature review, you are going to show the reader what you need to research that hasn't been covered and why. And that leads you right back to what we call your framework. And I will talk a little bit about your framework here today. So within the literature review, you're going to have different types of literature that you're going to look at. So if you're taking notes, one of the first pieces of advice I'd like to give you is that if you are using the wonderful resources of our library, you always want to see if you can find the most recent literature on a topic. And because our library is so easy to use, you can actually go in and say, I want all of the literature on this topic for the last 3 years. And then again, you can go in and add another, search word, and you can reduce that down and scale it down and scale it down. And by focusing on research that we really say not more than 5 years, I personally will push my students for 3 years, but there is no right or wrong as long as it's relatively recent. This is going to show your readers that you went in and you reviewed what was happening in the industry most recently in terms of research, models, ideas, and the list goes on. So you may be looking at topical research. This could be peer-reviewed research. This could be articles that have been peer-reviewed. What does peer-reviewed mean? It just means that, every year I'm putting a new chapter into a textbook. And once I write my chapter, there is a group of my peers that reads it. And they tell me, yeah, this is good. No, this really is bad. Or they tell me what I need to do to improve it. That's peer reviewed. Some journals are peer reviewed, some aren't. So we're looking for credible. Credible doesn't necessarily mean peer reviewed, but we are looking for credible. We're looking for information that is credible. So seminal work. What is seminal work? Seminal work would be the original creators. Okay. So for those of you that are in executive leadership, let's look at the original creator of transformational leadership. And we're talking about Bass and Avolio, right? They are the seminal work on transformational leadership. We highly recommend that you do bring the seminal work in, but we also want you to bring the newest research in. So seminal work is something that you probably will incorporate, but just remember, to support your reason for researching this topic, you also need the most recent research on that topic as well. It may be peer reviewed, it may not be peer reviewed. And what I mean by this, for those of you that are in DCS, how often does technology change? I mean, let's face it, was it not 6 months ago we were all freaking out that AI just came in, and I mean, really, let's talk technology. Ideas are outdated before you even have a chance to publish the article. And so for us to tell you that you have to have peer-reviewed, sources for especially if you're doing like design science or if you're doing, big data, it may be very impossible to find peer-reviewed sources. So what do we tell you to do then? You can go into the gray literature or the white papers, because just because they're not peer-reviewed doesn't mean they're not credible. So keep this in mind. And, and there is no super right or wrong. We just want to make sure that the information you're using doesn't come from Wikipedia. It doesn't come from AI, because AI is a great tool and I'm not going to tell you not to use it. But what I am going to say is you never use AI to help you synthesize data. Only you can do that. You can go in and use AI as a tool. No problem with that whatsoever. But you want to make sure that the literature that you're reviewing is credible. Then there's also theoretical frameworks of the literature review. You are getting a doctorate. You are not getting a PhD. And there's a big difference between the two. A professional doctorate is going to turn you into what we call a scholar practitioner. It means that you are coming in, you are completing this research, and you are taking this research into an environment, could be an industry, it could be a company, and you are going to present them with your findings as a scholar practitioner. So, what does that mean for research? Well, it means that we're not asking you to test or build a theory. We're asking you to conduct research. And if there is a model or theory that tricks your trigger and you really want to incorporate this, and I say, yay, go for it. But with a PhD, it's all theory. With a doctorate, what you're doing, it is not. Now, again, there may be a model, there may be a theory or a concept that you want to incorporate into the literature review. And, if you want to do that, we're not going to tell you can't. What we are going to tell you is if you decide to incorporate theory in your dissertation, then you need to become a subject matter expert on that theory. And that is done through the literature review. Okay? So keep that in mind. So there is no, we're not going to tell you, no, you can't do this and you can't do that unless we really think you can't do this and you can't do that. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to get you to see outside of the box. So as you make your way through your core courses, think about those concepts that you are really attracted to. There may be a leadership theory that you are just so dead set on that you think is just phenomenal, and it may become the foundation of your literature review and your research. Or there might be a model, and theories and models aren't the same thing. So keep that in mind. There might be a model out there, let's say you're in ODC and you're really into Cotter's model, right? And you really want to incorporate this model in your research, that's absolutely fine. But again, we're not going to require you to do that. It really depends upon the focus of your research and what you want to get from that research. But no matter what, it is the literature review that is going to show your readers and your instructors and your mentors that this needs to be researched. So again, there's all kinds of literature that you can use. There's all kinds of things. Now, I want to talk to you just a little bit about the conceptual framework. I know you've heard the term. I know you've heard the term TRIO. You've heard about the, problem, purpose, and research question. You've heard about the methodology. You've heard about the conceptual framework. You've heard about the theoretical framework. And yes, they're different. A conceptual framework, and I just want to define these for you before we move on so that you know, so that you're not confused as you move forward. A conceptual framework is everything. It's the argument for conducting your research. It's the problem, it's the purpose, it's the research question, it's the methodology, it's the data collection, it's the findings. Your conceptual framework is your entire dissertation. That is not the same as a theoretical framework. Your theoretical framework is what drives your literature review and takes you to the problem, purpose, and research question. Your theoretical framework is basically the outline of your literature review. It's everything that you feel needs to be covered in order to conduct this research. I see questions coming in. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. All right. Good. Thank you, Joelle. Hey, take a look at the chat pod, everybody. She is putting in some fantastic stuff. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm just looking. Okay, that's really good stuff. So be sure to look at the chat pod. Now, the one other thing that I said yesterday is that this is an iterative process. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that you could go in and write your whole literature review and have it lead us back into the problem, purpose, and research question. And then all of a sudden, you learn a new piece of information. And you need to incorporate that new piece of information. Well, because this is an iterative process, it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean one and done. How's that? That's a better way to put it. It means that you are going to go in and you are going to make adjustments. And it doesn't matter when. I have had students that had to adjust their conceptual framework while they were in the process of collecting data because they didn't expect what was going to happen. I'll give you an example of a student that her whole focus was on doctors, physicians that own their own practices. She went in, she got approved. Her proposal was approved. She got her IRB approval. She got her, site permission to go in and collect data. And she went in and she started interviewing doctors. And after the third one, she called me and said, it's not working. They don't know. They have no idea what I'm talking about. We had to change her framework. She moved it from doctors to physicians, assistants, the PAs. Once she did that, they could answer the question. So her framework was changed while she was collecting data. And so this is just an example of how it works. You may find a new piece of literature that you didn't include in your literature review, and you may call me up if I'm your mentor and say, hey, Dr. A, I didn't get this piece of literature. I didn't even know the study had come out. So we'll figure out a way to reframe everything so it stays aligned. So where am I? Let's talk a little bit about, the sources, just so that you have them. Sorry, I have to move all of the pictures and stuff because I can't see my slides. So again, the seminal research is the original sources. You are I highly recommend that you use them. Then you have your contextual research, which is like journal articles, industry articles, white papers, some gray papers. Recent research, dissertations, and research studies. I do want to point out one caveat here about dissertations. You do not want, and I know you've heard us say for the last 2 days, go look at other CTU dissertations and read chapter 5 and read this and read that. We want you to look at other dissertations, but you cannot cite other dissertations in your dissertation. It's a very important piece of information you need to remember. Dissertations are not peer reviewed. They are basically a student study. And while you can get all kinds of fantastic information, you find sources, you can get ideas for your research, you can get ideas on how a methodology was presented and done. We do not allow you to use them as sources for your dissertation. So keep that in mind. But don't let that dissuade you from going into the ProQuest database and looking at prior CTU dissertations, because those dissertations are published and they show you what was required in order to get published. And that's why you should be looking at them. Does somebody have a question? I heard somebody speak up.
I do.
Go ahead, Denise.
You were saying about ProQuest. It's like one of my favorite, things to use, my source thing, because in like EBSCO used to be when I was in grad school, but EBSCO or Sage and some of the others, they don't, because I'm in manufacturing in industry, I can't find anything but when I go in ProQuest, I find a lot of stuff.
Well, studies that have been published are different than dissertations. So studies that have been published, you should be able, especially if they're in journals, You can definitely use those. And also you can use that material, you know, for your industry. If there's industry
Yes.
standards, and Joelle just put the directions for finding dissertations in the chat
Okay,
link as
thank
well.
you. Thank you.
So I agree with you, Denise. I think that ProQuest is a great place, especially for research, to understand how research can be conducted. But don't let that dissuade you from other places to look up information. And another thing that I would like to remind you guys, as a matter of fact, Joella and I were talking about this before you guys came in. One of the most important sources that you have at CTU is access to our library. And I do not say that lightly. I say that with all seriousness. The relationship that you establish with the library will be one that you will be thankful for. If you are having a problem trying to word what you're looking for, contact the library. If you are just looking for ideas on a topic, guess what? Contact the library. If you need any sort of help, contact the library. Our library, I need everybody to mute, please, because I'm getting feedback. Sorry. Our library is phenomenal. And I want you to really get comfortable using it. You know, and I have students come into my res courses because that's what I teach. And I'm like, hey, did you reach out to the library? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, why? Why didn't you reach out to them? So definitely do it. Okay. And Joelle or Dr. Villarreal just brought up something really great. Chapter 5 in those dissertations really is great for understanding research that is needed in the future. All right. So I want to go through, hold on just a second. I got to move all the pictures again. So let's talk a little bit about the philosophical underpinnings of your literature review. What your literature review does is it shows you what the major conversations are about your topic, what's going on in the field that create the context for your research. So, you know, if I've owned a sign and graphics company for 25 years, when I want to understand what's happening in my industry, there are places that I can go to industry journals. There's tons of them. I can go to industry seminars and, you know, and the great big shows, industry shows. And this is how I get my information on what's happening in the sign and graphics industry, which is huge, absolutely huge. And I think that Denise, you said you're in manufacturing. I would think that you would be able to access some of these industry journals. Do they have them? Are you for your industry?
I haven't checked, but I will. I definitely
What
will.
industry? Can I ask what industry?
Automotive manufacturing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Um, get with
Yeah.
the library and ask them to help lead you in the right direction for getting information on that. I
Okay,
was
I
in
will.
vehicle manufacturing in the 90s. So I know that
Okay.
there's lots of good information out there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So this is going to tell you what's happening in the industry, what's going on in your field, and not just in the industry, but in your concentration as well. If you're in organizational change and development, there are just tons and tons of groups and websites that you can go to see what's happening in OD, right? What are some of the big arguments and positions in these fields? And there will be arguments and different opinions. And it doesn't matter what the topic is, but what you want to see is what they're saying. What are the debates? What's happening out there? You know, is one theorist saying this and is another saying this, and why? Why aren't they both seeing eye to eye? And that might lead you directly to your gap in the body of knowledge as well. What do I think about the different conversations in these fields? You remember yesterday I talked about reflexivity and positionality? What I was talking about is how you feel about these arguments. If it's a field that you are really involved in, you know, and it could be any field. If it's a field that you are passionate about and you're part of, you need to be able to also look at what your opinions are of what's going on, because this is going to help you stay away from bias as by reflecting and identifying your own thoughts. Okay, so keep that in mind. A literature review is not written to support what you're saying. A literature review is written to explain what's going on, what's happening in this field or industry. It may or it may not support what you're wanting to do. And if it doesn't support what you're wanting to do, then you have to adjust what you're wanting to do so that they're aligned. So keep that in mind. Which fields and disciplines intersect? And in what ways that contextualize my and frame my research? I'll give you another example. I have had several students over the years that were doing dissertations. They were, you know, they were military men and women that felt very strongly that research needed to be done on the military. But when it came time to research the military, they could not get permission. So what we would do is we would come in what I call an intersection of disciplines or an intersection of industries. And so in order to research the military, some of them went what I call the back door. In other words, they went to military members that had already retired. And they worked with those individuals to get a feel for what was going in the environment. Other students actually went a different method, looking at different like manufacturing fields that were very structured like the military. And they intersected those fields so that they could still get an idea of what was going on, and they could still research what's going on. So this is what I'm talking about. It's very possible that if you can't get what you need on an industry or an environment that you're interested in, you may be able to find one that intersects with it that will keep your interest and be just as exciting to you. What are the major tensions and disagreements within and across these fields? This is probably one of the most important parts of this presentation, I can tell you. You are not writing your literature review to satisfy your topic. You are writing your literature review to show your readers what's going on by comparing and contrasting what's happening in the research. You find an article that supports your idea and an article that does not. You don't sweep that other article under the rug and just use the one that supports your idea. You need to compare and contrast. You will be doing this in all of your core courses, and it's something to get comfortable doing. So I just want to let you know that, because we want to know both the pros and cons. We want to know what is being done in this industry or in this environment, and the positive, the negative, the pros, the cons, compare and contrast. Now we come to the gap in the body of knowledge. What do I hope to contribute to these conversations? You write your literature review to figure out what's happening in this environment, and that is going to lead you to the gap in the body of knowledge. What hasn't been researched? You may be really surprised. You may find thousands of articles on a model or a topic or a theory that have been done, and you're like, oh my gosh, I mean, this has been done and done and done. And then you add your industry to it, and the light bulb comes on because you realize this has not been researched in this industry. Why not? And what do you have? You have a gap in the body of knowledge. This is why you need to be very conscientious about what you're looking for and how you want to approach it. I think I got a question here. Hold on just a second. Okay, James says, I have a feeling I may be doing that intersection or meeting with retirees about what's going on. I feel like this will be something I may have to go through. I'm assuming that you're wanting to do something on the military, James. Is that correct? We, if you reach out to me or Dr. Villarreal, we can hook you up with instructors that understand this obstacle and can give you ideas on how you can approach it. So you're not out of the running for doing your research. It's all about how you spin it. As much as I hate to say that, it really is about how you spin it. And we have so many military instructors, so many instructors here at CTU that know how the military work. We can definitely refer people to you to help you with that. So don't be afraid to reach out, okay? So the gap in the body of knowledge is what you hope to contribute to these conversations. And once you get done building that chapter 2, that literature review, that story that leads you to that one area that really needs to be researched, you pretty much have your framework built. And, I mean, provided there may be new literature that comes in. I had a student that defended, and it was after he defended, he called me up and he said, Dr. A, there's a new study out. And I didn't use it. And I said, well, go put it in your recommendations. And so that's exactly what he did before he published. He just put it in chapter 5 in his recommendations, that there is a new study that, would really be good to research. And that's what I'm talking about. I mean, there is changes all the way through the very end. What concerns do I have about my possible contributions to the existing research? Only you can answer that, but you need to be honest. You need to be candid, and right now, I mean, this is just a start. I know that you want to finish off this, this symposium with your trio and with an idea of where you want to go. And I get it. I was there once and I get it. But I want you to keep in mind that what you leave with today is going to be so different than what you come into your res classes with. So what this was it was 2 days of exercising your mind and getting you into that scholar practitioner mindset, right? Right now, you're doctoral students. We are moving you to become scholar practitioners. And to do this, you have to be honest with how you want to contribute to that body of knowledge. How are you going to contribute as a scholar? And I guarantee, I mean, I've been doing this for 2 decades. I guarantee that how you feel about yourself and your research today is going to be so different when you get into the res courses. I see it. I live it every day. And I know that right now you're apprehensive and you're like, I don't know if I can do this. Yeah, you can. You can do it because you've got people like me, and you've got people like Joelle, and you've got people like Dr. V. You've got us here to help you do it. Take advantage of us as tools. That's why we're here, right? And I guarantee you, we're going to whip you into a scholar practitioner. I promise. I think one of the most important things is to remember to reach out. Are there voices or points of view left out of the conversation? Are there groups that are being marginalized by the predominant conversations? And this can quite often lead you to a gap in the body of knowledge. It truly can. I mean, let's face it, folks, we're in America. Most of us are, and there's always groups that have been marginalized that need to be brought into the forefront. And this could be your link to where you want to research, and I mean, it's just the sky's the limit, right? You just have to figure out where you want to go with it. But this is another way to really get a feel for the gap. How do I conceptualize and position my research in relation to the conversations that are happening? And the answer to that is chapter 2. When you go in and you write your literature review, you are conceptualizing your entire project, your entire study. So, when you leave here today, if you don't remember anything, remember the one thing I want you to leave with is that your literature review is the backbone of everything. It truly is. A poor literature review leads to a poor study. A good literature review leads to a good study. And that's how you conceptualize what you're going to research. So let me look here real quick, see if we have any questions. I am going to go through the how-tos and stuff, just to give you an idea of what they look like. Okay, Zachary, the amount of support and guidance that's been spoken about in the last 2 days is amazing. And I hope, Zachary, that you'll take advantage of that. I had one of the students that attended one of my sessions yesterday has already emailed me, and I sent her a dissertation that was previously published. So that, that's what's important here. I'm looking to see if there's any other questions. I'm not seeing any.
I have a question.
Go for it.
How many literature reviews are we going to have during this whole process?
What do you mean, how many literature? Do you mean, do you have to write more than one?
Yeah,
No.
that's exactly what I mean. Okay.
No.
I was like, "Wait, how many are we going to
Unless you want
do?"
to.
Okay. All right,
No, and
great.
that's actually a very good question, Lewis. And let me tell you why. Because you're going to go through your core classes, and basically anytime you can incorporate your topic into your core class, you've written another part of your literature review for your dissertation.
Okay.
So what I suggest, and that's why that's such a good question, when you go into a course, take a look at the syllabus and look at the assignments and the discussions, actually. And if you see a place that you might be able to incorporate your topic for your dissertation, shoot an email to the instructor, or I am the instructor, and say, my dissertation topic is this. I want to know if I can focus on from this perspective or approach in this paper, and 9.9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes. And so
Okay.
what happens is you buy this, or you write, I don't know where that came from. That was really an odd slip. You're going to write this paper and then take it and put it in your folders for your dissertation. You've got the sources, you've got the paper, you've got the information. So anytime you can do that, put it to the side in your dissertation file, because that's a part of your literature review that you just wrote. So, moral of the story, ask your instructors, speak out. And if they tell you no, that's the worst thing that can happen. So what? Move forward. But if they tell you yes, wow, what an opportunity. So excellent
you.
question.
Well, thank you.
Anybody, I mean, these are good ones. What other questions? Certainly you've got things that you're thinking about. What other questions can we answer? Crickets. All right, so let's look at just some of the fundamentals of the literature review. There is in the Doctoral Resource Center, there is a, can't remember where it is, Joelle. The rubric for the dissertations. I don't remember where it
Oh yeah,
is.
it's on the template page. I'll share that in the chat.
Okay, so on that template page, we have what we call a rubric. And the rubric shows everything that you need to include in your dissertation. This is what, after you write your 3 chapters, and we sent it for approval to a proposal review. This is the rubric that they use. I don't know that this is the rubric that IRB uses, but I'm sure that IRB is very cognizant of it. And I highly recommend that you download it and look at it, because it truly lays out everything that's going to need to be in your dissertation. Additionally, there are templates. There's a template for design science, a template for qualitative, quantitative, action research, and I don't remember what else, but I know that there's a ton of templates, and I would download the template. I would download what you think you're going to do. If you think you're going to end up with a qualitative study, although I don't recommend you selecting the method before you do the literature review, but take a look at those templates, because they'll give you a good idea of everything that needs to go into your dissertation. So chapter 2 is the literature review. It is usually one of the first big pieces of your actual dissertation that you're going to write. But you will be putting bits and pieces into chapter 1 as well at the same time. So in the template, the literature review on page 2, on chapter 2 shows you the sections that you need, right? You go through, there's an introduction, and the introduction restates your purpose and problem. Then you go through what we call a literature strategy. And this is where you go in and you determine how you're going to find your information. And if you're taking notes, write down next to literature search strategy, call Joelle.
That was
Because
good. That was good. That was a good plug there for you, Joel.
yeah, well, you know it as well as I do. I mean, to not, contact Joelle or her team is just hurting you. I mean, she's going to be there whether you contact her or not. And so taking the time to contact her is going to help you in this area. Then you're going to write your 20 pages of literature review using between 60 and 80 sources to support your literature review. So you go in, you write your intro, you write your search strategy. You actually use the search strategy. You don't just write it, you actually use it. Then you go in and you write your literature review, which if you recall, when I first started, I said your literature review is your theoretical framework, right? It is what strengthens or creates your argument. It is the backbone of your framework. Once you get through that, you should reach a point. Go ahead, TJ. Hey, good to see you, TJ.
I had a question in the chat. If y'all could just read it, because it's kind of lengthy.
Let me see if I can find it. Hold on. Oh, I see. It went all the way back to the beginning. Okay. How much do you think, pardon me, How much do you think marketing popularity of certain professors impacts how much their work is cited? For instance, if a celebrity pushed an academic text, it would probably be cited a lot without necessarily being profound. Almost like, I don't know what focal is. What is that? You got me on that one. I have no idea what that is. I don't understand why he's the most cited academic in history. I have no idea. I mean, that is actually a pretty profound question because marketing really does drive a literature. But then again, if you're not sure, then you want to go with peer reviewed. That is a really
Yeah,
profound
seriously, I
question.
really think that, especially with business professors, and I didn't come up with this idea totally independent. I kind of learned this from a business professor. Like, actually, like Constant Contact is like an email platform. You can send like 50,000 emails for $300. So, say you had a book or a paper come out and you emailed it to every business professor on earth, right? You kind of marketed that, and someone might have some profound literature sitting in their in their desk that's published, in a obscure journal, but it's not popular. And that's Foucault, Michael Foucault.
Oh,
He's
okay.
the most
Yeah.
cited. He's the most cited academic in history. He's a French historian and philosopher.
I have no idea who he is. Just okay.
Yeah, I thought
I
everybody
learned
knew
something new
Foucault. That's
today.
crazy.
This is
Mind if
another
I
reason.
add
Go
something? Oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah,
I was just
go,
going to
Joelle.
say, citation metrics can be useful. So, looking at how heavily something is cited or an individual author, somebody deemed as a key author. However, this is the key part of this process that is also going to be an influential factor in how you determine which you should cite. And your citation is, critically evaluating each of those sources to determine if it's an appropriate fit. If you can question the information and say, well, maybe I don't believe that this is a key author. You're in a position to think very critically about the information that is currently available on any given topic, and to determine again what you think is an appropriate fit, even if it's cited at a high level. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily something you should cite in your dissertation or including in your dissertation. So that's where that you know not just kind of blindly selecting sources, but going through the process of being very cognizant of what you are choosing to include in your dissertation, because some students, we have one student who found 5,000 sources, but he's not going to cite 5,000 sources in his dissertation. He's going to be careful and critical about that information. And it's kind of bridges into the conversation of bias when something is marketed heavily. That is bias potential. And so maybe there's other sources out there that aren't cited at the same high level on a similar topic, but are actually more important and more crucial to that topic. So again, it's just, and work with myself, work with your professors, and we can, of course, you can get feedback from us on that process as well. But I just wanted to add that in.
I love that, and thank you. I really appreciate that. And that made me think of one other thing that I forgot to mention. Just because something is published, a study is published, doesn't necessarily mean it's good study. And so I want you to keep that in mind as well. You need to learn to critique what is being done out there in terms of research. I guess there's like journals out there that are not real reputable. I don't know who they are, but I just know that they are out there. Or it's one of those journals that says you got to pay me to publish in that journal. So you need to be really, really careful about the information that you're putting in your literature review. And that means that you are going to become the person that critiques, and that's what makes you become that subject matter expert as well. So does that answer your questions, TJ?
Absolutely. And I mean, of course, we should be responsible and actually dig into anything we're studying. So, but I just think I don't, uh, it's almost getting to this larger point of kind of like the future of academics in this internet world, like, kind of competition and the marketing. And et cetera, et cetera. Um, like who is deemed like a paradigm shifting scholar is really has a lot to do with popularity to me. So, like we kind of say that like peer review, I took a philosophy of science class. That's why I'm this deep in this, that peer review is so unbiased, but like, come on, like peer review justified slavery at one time, right? Like peer review is really kind of a popularity contest, or like Harvard
Oh,
with
no, no, no,
accreditation,
no, no. And
right?
I appreciate where you're going with this, but we're talking academic peer review, and it's different. It is
Kind of.
different.
I mean, I
I
took
am
a
a
class
peer
at Emory.
reviewer.
I have
I
Emory
am
professors that will argue with you all day about how they don't really think peer review is what we think peer review is, for
Well,
instance.
then
But
apparently they haven't peer reviewed then, because when I go in and peer review, I peer review from an author that I don't know. And quite often it can be a topic that I have to learn about before I can review it. And it is done with as little bias as possible. So, it's
I
really
give,
different on an academic level. It truly is. If you're trying to get your work into an academic journal, it is not a popularity contest.
Christina, Christina, I was gonna add to what both of you are saying. Also, I think before it's also done with peer reviewing, they've probably done a lot of triangulation, right? So that would eliminate any kind of or minimize bias to an acceptable what do you call it, threshold, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
What do you think, Joelle? What are your thoughts on that?
On the credibility of peer-reviewed publications. So I
Yeah,
did want to mention, kind of something you mentioned earlier, that there are predatory journals. So that's maybe perhaps what is part of that argument, is that there are less credible journals. And so you want to not just look at the article itself, but look at the reputation of the journal and who's on their editorial board, and reviewing those publications, are they transparent about the process? Are they um, very thorough and also revealing how they go through that process of, you know, reviewing the content that they're publishing in their journal. And then also another component is, research is always changing and information is constantly being updated. You think about neuroscience was the term neuroscience was coined in like 1962 by, I think, there was a professor at MIT. And so that's something that's a very evolving field that's changing right before our eyes, just like AI is. So that's, why you are again in a position to critically evaluate the information and determine what is the best fit. And yes, there may be sources out there that claim they're peer reviewed, but not coming from a reputable journal publication. And so that's kind of what we're contending with in this day and age, is there's a lot of good information mixed with a lot of bad information, to kind of put it simply. But let me know if you want me to expand on that. And there are sources out there on how to kind of evaluate and differentiate between good and bad journals, and know what to look for predatory journals, is what they call it. We call it in higher education and academia.
well, I would love to see you do a lunch and learn on something like that. That would be such an awesome. I'm going to reach out to Dr. Madison and ask her about that, because I think that would be a great topic. Sorry, side note. These are good questions, though. And okay, so Lynn says, if my subject has very little research on it, very marginalized, and I know who you are, Lynn. Did you get the thing I sent to you? Would it be appropriate to include a wider search in my literature review, meaning older research in 10, what is that? Tangential subjects, research in other countries? You can definitely do research in a more broad manner, especially if what you're talking about is more common across the pond than it is here. Then you can definitely use that to expand your literature. So who else did you put on there? Older research is fine, but again, we're going to be looking for that recent research. So you can use older research as more of a seminal, but you really want to find anything that is within that 5 to 3 year. And that's why I sent you that dissertation this morning. So anybody have any thoughts on this? Joelle, Dr. V? We good? Go ahead.
Was there another question? I was answering another student question in the chat. Sorry about that.
No, she was just talking about, she really does have a very marginalized community, but I don't think it's a small community, but I think it's very marginalized. And so she was just talking about expanding her research abroad because it's not normal here in the United States, what she's writing on.
Yes, absolutely. You do want to broaden your search if you're running into kind of dead ends, essentially, with being able to find anything that closely aligns with your research. So today I actually sent a student some resources. They were looking at a specific country, and we basically are going to take a broader approach to looking at other countries that would be similar, to kind of see if there's any somewhat relevant research that's connected. So the same research may be conducted just in a different country. But yeah, taking a broader approach, and we'll kind of poke into like different, regions or different populations, or kind of look at, different perspectives to see if we can kind of track down and find those hidden gems, so to speak, that address different components of your research. So it may only address one subcomponent, but it has, really good information that's addressing that one subtopic that's part of your larger conversation. And that's what we do. You want to do anyways. You want those really focused research resources, in addition to taking a broad kind of overview of your approach to your research, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And see, this is why you guys need to be in contact with our library because this is the information and the help that you're going to get. Lynn, shoot me an email. I have some ideas that we can talk about a little bit. And then you can, after we talk about those, then you can get with Joelle's team and see where they can direct you. But I do have some ideas on, remember we talked about the intersection or the back door? That may be the way that we have to go with your dissertation topic. So email me and let's set up a time and we'll do a call. Will that work? This is good. I love a good conversation. Who else has a question or a thought? A concern? All right. Well, so far so good. I'm thrilled with how this is going. And we're almost done. And this presentation is in the Doctoral Research Center, so you can take a look at it. Really, the format of the literature review is just that. You do your strategies, and that's a whole picture on how you're going to find your information. You write your literature review, and that's your theoretical framework. And then you identify the gap in the body of knowledge. And that is what supports your problem, purpose, and research question. It's really, the conclusions just tie it all together and support your research question. Sorry, I have to move all of these things. And then the chapter summary is exactly that. You'll have written many, many chapters or many, many summaries by the time you get to chapter 2. So
Can we create our own theory within this literature that we were going to write?
that's an interesting question. Who just asked me that?
Me, Luis.
Well, if you were doing a PhD, I would say go for it, but you're not. You're doing a scholar, practitioner doctorate. That doesn't mean that you couldn't end up with a theory. I have had a couple of students that actually coined a new theory in the research that they did. But as far as approaching your research with the intention of creating a theory, I would not recommend it. Because it is that literature review that would have to show the need for the theory. And I mean, you're talking a lot of research. You would almost have to do a meta-analysis before you could really determine if a theory is needed. And you don't have enough time. I just don't see having enough time to do that with a doctorate. So, but it's a
Okay.
good question. And, you know, and it does happen. I mean, like I said, I've been here 20 years, and 2 times I've had students that ended up with theories, and it was amazing.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for answering my question.
All right. Any
We
final
are at
questions?
time.
Yeah. Are we
Sorry.
good? All right. Thank you, Joelle. Thank you, Dr. Villarreal.
Welcome.
Thank you, everybody. My best to you. I hope I see you in the research classes. Bye, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.